either is our undoing or until we awaken to archaic values. And that's why the weekend is called what it is. And the archaic revival is a very large cultural wave that, can be pushed. You could trace the beginnings of it, the first swell, back to the turn of the century with relativity and theosophy and surrealism and the work of Freud and Jung on the unconscious. But it's a discovery, a moving toward a realization that the values that can serve us are archaic values, that we have to go completely outside of history. And we have to make, we are going to find out the nature of human nature. We can't have it several ways. We can't live in obfuscation. The real question is man good? Because we're going to find out. Because as we move more and more into this cultural domain that I call the imagination, nothing lies between us and the expression of our dreams, And so far, our dreams have been, I think, expressed fairly shoddily. Our cities are like sores. Our contribution to the ecosystem of the planet is plutonium, pesticides, chlorofluorocarbons, so forth and so on. An apologist for the human race would say, but we had so many strikes against us. The law of gravity, the cost of materials, the resistance of water, air, and so forth and so on. Well, fine, then we're going to get rid of all that. We're going to enter into the imagination where, the tensile strength of a structure is whatever you say it is. This is where language comes in, I think. Language is the sort of the CAD-CAM, the computer-assisted drawing software for creating the reality of the imagination. I think it's overwhelming, our situation, the potential and the depth of the strikes against us. It's really, what's going on this planet is absolutely unique so far as we know. It's never happened before on this planet. Intelligence emerging out of biological organization and actually having a shot at what? Who knows? Being itself is some kind of opportunity. The reasonable expectation is that nothing exists. Why should anything exist? It seems to me the most conservative universe would be a dimensionless plenum, a homogeneous, pointless, dimensionless. That makes sense. Why, then, is there instead, multiplicity upon multiplicity? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, stuff like that. How in the world do you get from utter emptiness to that kind of thing? The richness, the creative force behind it all is awesome. And I'm not religious in any ordinary sense. And in fact, I'm violently anti-religious in most senses. I'm certainly, would lead the charge against priestcraft in any form. But the picture of the universe as a machine subject to a few laws discovered by a bunch of guys in powdered wigs, that's ridiculous. You've got to be kidding. Science doesn't deal, as it's always at pains to point out, with what's called subjective experience. Well, that's really too bad, because that's all any of us ever have, is subjective experience. So we have, in the interests of, I don't know what exactly, a curious drive, an obsession of the Greeks, really, an obsession with the physical world that we have not been able to disentangle ourselves with, so that, we can measure the temperature of distant stars, but we don't know what we think about the woman we're living with. stuff like that. Just such a completely overgrown and overdeveloped dichotomous situation that it makes no sense. So, in terms of any kind of conclusion or something like that, it's that there is an experience. It's harmless, meaning it can't kill you. That's the guarantee there. There is this experience. It is in our cultural heritage. It synergizes the most profound and private dimensions of our being. It allows us to recast ourselves in new forms quickly. And if we don't turn back toward this style of relating to ourselves, to each other, and to the world, but persist instead in the addiction to syntactical abstraction, then I think we'll just run it off the edge. And it will be a tragedy, because it is a horse race. Don't let anybody kid you. It's not that the good guys are miles and miles behind, and so you just might as well tear your ticket up and throw it in the air and go home. No, it's an absolute horse race. Neck and neck, photo finish, race between education and disaster. I mean, we're going to either burst out into a millennium of freedom and caring and decency, or we're going to toxify the whole thing and just turn it into an ash heap. And the responsibility falls largely on us. And we don't know. I mean, the momentum, the lethal momentum of these institutions is terrifying. Our position is like that of people who are attempting to turn a battleship 180 degrees, and we're doing it with an oar. You know? I mean, the momentum of it is incredible. But it is not a closed system. And I say this as a reasonable person. I mean, I want to keep stressing that I won't sit at the same table with the channelers and the people who have good news about Atlantis and all of this stuff. I mean, if this is your private thing, it's okay, but the rules of evidence preclude it being taken seriously until you get your act more together. But in the psychedelic experience, there is confounding paranormal material. It's the only place I've ever found it. I scoured India. These guys, as far as I can tell, it's a skin game. But outlandish things are going on inside the psychedelic experience. It seems to imply the thing we had hardly dared hope, which is that the world is whatever you say it is if you know how to say it right. And then the whole task becomes, how do we take control of this language that allows us to say it right? I think I speak for most people here, serve the idea that matter is ultimately at the command of mind. But we need to move that forward as a demonstrable principle, because without that, the fear of most people is that we're imprisoned by physics in a sinking submarine. And yet when you go into these psychedelic spaces, what you discover is that all bets are off, that we can't even tell how weird it is. I mean, it may be possible to walk to Arcturus if you have the right set of coordinates. And the whole concern is to get the word out, to spread this meme, to empower people to confirm the existence of these realities for themselves, and to begin to form a kind of community consensus about it. You know, it's only, I guess in 1992, we will celebrate the 500th anniversary of the discovery of the New World. 500 years ago, people discovered the other half of this planet. And we're living there now. This is the New World. 500 years ago, this didn't exist. What existed was a vast cataract patrolled by sea monsters. and the oceans of the world poured off this cataract into the infinite abyss, and that was the edge of the world. We, the psychedelic people, are like these early explorers coming back and saying, you know, I sailed west for 16 days and I didn't go mad. Instead, this is what happened. And I bring news of this, this, and this. And what we're accumulating are like the diaries of explorers. But there's a world there. It's a mental world, yes. But we are mental creatures. Take note of that. If we could go there, we would go there. And the thing is, we don't know that we can't go there. We have never taken the imagination seriously. We have never taken the self-management of culture seriously. We've always sort of thought things should just go along like a random walk. But now, because of the immense technical power that's come into our hands, the design process of the whole planet is now on our desk, and we're being asked to essentially step into stewardship of the entire planetary environment. We have to have then a vision. We have to have a dream, not a vision or a dream, the vision, the dream. And it can't come from the personality of individual human beings. It has to come out of the bones of the planet. And this is, I think, what the psychedelic experience is broadcasting. It's broadcasting the hologrammatic, fractal, altogether, all at once image of totality that our religions have sensed and called God, that the shaman have learned to use as a vast kind of computer for extracting information and for generating healing energy. But it is that there is some kind of controlling, minded, integrated thing behind nature. And we're not going to understand that this weekend, next week, or ever. This is not a relationship of solving a problem. It's a relationship of being an initiate of a mystery and then living your life, you know, in the light of that. And the task of understanding is endless, because understanding is simply the integrated coordination of pattern. And nature is pattern upon pattern, upon pattern, upon pattern, upon level. It has no depth. Its measure cannot be taken. Everything is infinite, and everything is animate, and everything is filled with a kind of deep concern for humanity. I mean, we are the lame little brother because we seem to be cut off from all the rest of this. Well, that's kind of a Blakean take on it.
The shamanistic cultures themselves having notion of a fall, and that and this may just be the people that we happen to interview in our area where we're actually studying it, but that the old days of shamanism were the good days, and what we have now is diluted. And is that just a matter of cultural contact with other cultures, and that the original shamanistic cultures were isolated, or is indeed there a different quality to the time of this 20,000 years ago that led to a general fall amongst our species of people in general?
It's a very complicated question. The answer gets pretty technical, or talking about it gets pretty technical. The thing that's so interesting about psilocybin and DMT is that they're so closely related to ordinary brain chemistry. The brain chemistry of all higher animals runs largely on serotonin. Serotonin is 5-hydroxytryptamine. DMT is N,N-dimethyltryptamine. Psilocybin is 4-phosphoryloxy N,N-dimethyltryptamine, but the phosphoryloxy group goes off as it crosses the blood-brain barrier, so it's 4 hydroxy and N-dimethyltryptamine. So it's very interesting that these powerful, naturally occurring hallucinogens are in many cases only one molecule away from endogenous neurotransmitters. So in answer to your question, it's possible to suggest that we're as close as one mutation away from significant shifts in the chemical mix of the human brain. And for instance, in the pineal gland, there's an enzyme called adenosine, which is chemically 6-methoxy-tetrahydroharmalan. It's very closely related to the harmine alkaloids in ayahuasca. Well, the persistent myth about ayahuasca is that it creates states of group-mindedness and telepathy. The original alkaloid was actually named telepathine until it was discovered that it was structurally similar to harmine, which had been previously described by Hochstein and Paradis. So, in other words, what's going on here is the possibility that language, telepathy, and all of these mental abilities that are unique among human beings have to do with a very, very small number of mutations in the brain-amine production pathways. One of the things that I want to talk about here is the possibility of new forms of communication, and that the psychedelics can stimulate new forms of communication among human beings, even in the way that they created language in the first place. In other words, I see language as a Model A version of something which could be made a lot more efficient and better and effective. You had something, and then or did you? You go ahead.
Right. When humankind changes direction and goes towards the altered state, the psilocybin altered state, and that projection, what do you think that we will do with science and all of the stuff that we've created that is destroying us?
Well, science, there are different ways to practice science. The Greek style was, science was a spiritual undertaking. The purpose was to know. The idea being that somehow there was something good about knowing. I mean, I had a philosophy professor who said, first of all, I'll teach you how to recognize the truth. Secondly, I'll try to teach you what's so great about it. And this is that kind of a situation. Science, philosophers of science are perfectly aware of the limitations of science. It's the thousands and thousands of workbench scientists who think of themselves as servants of a world religion who create the problem. We need to know how matter works, and we need to know the things which science tells us, but it is no basis for extrapolating into human values. And the culprit there is the concept of social science. This is an obscene idea, and we should disabuse ourselves of it immediately. Social science, psychology, intellectual history, even linguistics, I would say, and philology, all of this stuff. These people should find honest work. They're not scientists, and they're mucking up. I mean, it was a grand dream of science that it would extend its methods into social phenomena, having had such great success in the 19th century with Darwin and Wallace and biology. They thought, well, then Herbert Spencer and all these people, why not just extend it into society? But the problem is there are emergent properties in society that exceed the descriptive engines of science. There are emergent properties in biology. I mean, biology is not may also have to be left out of science. I mean, biology is classificatory, and it works very well there. But in terms of mechanism and understanding, it's pretty murky. DNA was decoded in 1950. The molecular geneticists promised a golden age shortly to follow, and it's 40 years later, and they still don't understand gene expression or what all this stuff is in the DNA. It's been very disappointing, considering what was promised. I think science is an art. Everything is an art, because we have no sure knowledge of anything. I mean, maybe mathematics is not an art, because there, you work from artificially constructed premises. I'm very keen on science. I just don't like its philosophical pontifications. As a method, it's been very effective, but it's bred great pride in it, and it's thought that it could turn itself to domains where it was completely inappropriate.
Yeah. I have a lot of questions, but I want to try to limit them to maybe a few, one or two. I haven't tried mushrooms yet. I sent away the kit. I'm going to grow them. But a lot of the things that you've been explaining and describing, to me, have become a reality over the last year. And just the usage of hashish, just ingestion of it, on a very, I have to say, a very well, probably limited, because I'm comparing my experience to the psilocybin prescriptions that you give, and they sound, tremendous. I think the question I'm looking for is, before you, I guess, got involved with psilocybin and DMT and things like that, were you predisposed to saving the planet and being a humanistic type of person? And did the DMT and psilocybin did it take you to a more profound awareness of, what you as a human wanted to do?
Well, I've thought about all of this, because it's weird to have the life I have. It's so strange. I mean, until I went into therapy, I thought I had the most ordinary family in the world. And then once you're in therapy, you discover, that no, it was the most insane scene you've ever heard of, and you just didn't notice. But I've always been interested in nature, and I've always been interested in beauty. And I think it was the pursuit of beauty that served me best, because when I was a kid, first I started out collecting rocks, and then I collected butterflies, and then in my emergent phallic phase I was an amateur rocketeer, and the major thrill there was setting off these explosive fuels and watching the possibility of shrapnel and all this stuff. And then as I got into rockets, I got into science fiction. And science fiction I really consider a proto-psychedelic drug, because what science fiction does is it gives permission to imagine. It says, try it this way, this way, this way. And then you get, as a kid, you get the idea, that anything is possible. That's what science fiction teaches you. And then... And I was really obsessive about science, and I wanted to be an astronautical engineer, and Werner von Braun was my hero and all that. And then it sort of flipped at some point, and I got in, and I decided that I had been terribly narrow, and I was figuring all this out for myself. I was in some little town in Colorado, and I decided I'd been terribly narrow and that it was all in the humanities. And I began reading Henry James and all this stuff. And I was into Aldous Huxley as an example of an English novelist, and read Antique Chrome Yellow, After Many a Summer Must Die the Swan, and so forth and so on. And then came upon The Doors of Perception. And just, I was like 14 years old, and it was astonishing. And I said, if a tenth of this is true, then this is the most amazing thing there is. Well, if you've read The Doors of Perception, you know it's actually a terribly conservative gloss. I mean, it's all about looking at pictures and seeing the iskite in the folds of your trousers and thinking about how that relates to Meister Eckhart and all this Huxleyan type stuff. But that gave me the idea, and then I stuck with it. I stuck with it somehow and found marijuana, and that went on to LSD. And then my great good fortune, I think, is that just a few months after I took LSD, somebody brought me DMT. And you know, DMT is a miracle. I mean, DMT is like something that fell out of a flying saucer. I mean, it is so strong and so psychedelic. I mean, I can't imagine being more smashed than that, or wanting to be. I mean, it's more like a near-death experience than any near-death experience I ever heard anybody describe. They sound absolutely pedestrian compared to a DMT trip where, you know, you're sure you're dead. You say, what the hell else could it be? You know? And then I went to Asia. I was at Berkeley when I had all these drug experiences, and then I went to Asia and tried to find it with yogas and all that, and ended up smoking a lot of hashish and becoming more cynical than ever about spirituality and just saying, you know, hashish and LSD. That was, before I went to the Amazon, that was what I discovered that really convinced me you could get somewhere, was, you know, take a bunch of LSD and then smoke great hash on top of that, and really crazy things do go on. And then I went to the Amazon, and, you know, incredible shamanism is happening there. I mean, they don't hold back. The method I used in India was I would just say, you know, what can you show me? You know, I've read all these books. I know how to manipulate all this multisyllabic mumbo-jumbo, but just one thing. And I said, oh, no, it's not happening. It's very pushy. But then when you go to South America, then they just say, okay, let's go out in the forest, we'll get this stuff, we'll cook it up, and tonight we'll show you our best trick. And it slams you to the wall. I mean, you plead for mercy. And it was a vindication, because the thing I want to stress, and I don't know if it's as important to you as it is to me, but you do not have to sell out to any form of airheadism. You can be as tight-assed as you want. You can be as hard-nosed as you want. You can be as demanding, analytical, rational as you want. And the thing is bigger than you are. It'll just take you apart. It'll make you weep like a baby. So there's nothing about faith and sensitivity and reaching. And no. When it comes, you know, it kicks in the front door and takes you prisoner. It's and that was what the flying saucer meant when it said, because you didn't believe in anything. This is the way to get somewhere. You'll never get anywhere if you believe in stuff, because, you know, it'll take you 6 months to work through Babaji, and then you have to go on to somebody else, and life is just not long enough to give all these guys a crack at your enlightenment. So, you know, you sort of have to goose it along. And the great vindication is then that when you behave like that, when you take that stance, which you would expect would betray you into nihilism, depression, and so forth, instead, no, that's works. That's the method. Then the gold, you know, reject everything but gold. And you know what gold is? It looks like gold. It feels like gold. It's not something that you have to, you know. I mean, I'm amazed at what thin soup is dished out as spiritual food. And it's because we are, as individuals, conflicted, you know. I feel this in myself. I mean, it's hard to take psychedelics. It's not hard to sweep up around the ashram, but it's hard to take psychedelics.
You know, I read some stuff by Andrew Weil where he was talking about going in search of the ayahuasquero, the curandero, and he talks a lot about these guys that are mixing up this sloppy brew, and they're drunks, and they're just, I don't even know if you could go down to the Amazon and find. I don't know what you could find. I haven't been there, but it does. What his accounts were is there's a lot of just slop and drunk stuff happening. That a lot of these guys are alcoholics.
No, you're absolutely right.
And that's the main thing happening was the alcohol throughout. And the Christianity's just kind of pervaded so much of this stuff that I wonder what's left and how you find it anymore.
Well, it really helps to do your homework. It really helps to go down there knowing as much as you possibly can about all this.
Because apparently so much of what you get out of it has to do with how it's made.
That's
who
right.
Makes it, how it's mixed,
That's
and
right.
so on. And if you don't make it yourself and you don't know what's happening, then what have you got?
Because ayahuasca is a combinatory drug, it isn't like peyote or mushrooms or morning glories where you get the thing and eat it, and if you eat it in sufficient amounts, it works. This is something where two plants have been combined, and the proportions must be correct, and the method must be correct. So there's a huge room for personalities to come into it, for fast shuffles of all sorts, and mind games of all sorts to take place.
These guys, a lot of them are very egotistical, too. There's a lot
It's
of
true.
involved.
No, what you have to do if you're into ayahuasca, or what we did, was first of all, we drank a huge amount of swill, and we worked our way slowly through these people. And if somebody appeared to be an asshole, they were so classified and moved on. And eventually, we got to good people. But what we did then was we got samples of their stuff, brought it back, put it through mass spectrophotometers and high-pressure liquid chromatography, saw what the proportions were, collected the live plants, moved them to Hawaii, grew the plants, reconcocted the thing, remass spec'd what we did, and made it as much like the good stuff as possible. So it was a project of 15 years and really maniacal dedication. But I have the faith, that if given sufficient time to work on ayahuasca, you could produce a drug out of there so good that it would be ludicrous to suggest that it was illegal. Because you see, this is brain soup. These are all neurotransmitters. There's not a non-endogenous neurotransmitter in the whole beverage. So really what you're
There's not a what?
a non-endogenous neurotransmitter, meaning everything in this drug that you're about to drink is already in your head. There's nothing unusual where drugs like ketamine, mescaline, LSD, there's none of that in your body.
What's the trip like?
It's like a slow-release DMT trip. It lasts 4 to 6 hours, and it's intensely visual. And unlike psilocybin, it doesn't have this outer space, science fiction, mega apocalyptarian kind of take on it, which is what psilocybin does. Psilocybin shows you the machines preparing to transport the faithful away from a burning earth. That's not what ayahuasca is about. It's about nature, water, flow, life, energy. It's almost, when MDMA was so hot and people called it an empathy drug and said it makes you empathetic with the people you're with, ayahuasca makes you empathetic with the people you're not with. And that's a much more profound experience because there's so much more of them,
I don't understand how you mean that, empathetic with the people you're not with. I don't quite get it.
You feel the poignancy of the human situation. You feel, I'm usually in a hut somewhere surrounded by a bunch of Indians, and suddenly I understand what the songs are about. And they're always about the same thing. They're about the water and the people and the life and the fish and lost love, but you have this heart opening thing. Say, the folk This is their mystery. This is their I'm getting it now. I'm feeling, this huge wave of the wisdom of the folk. And they say this to you in Peru. They say, this is our university. You went to Harvard. We went to ayahuasca. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can comment on ginseng weed, which I believe is the same thing as morning glory seeds.
No, it's different.
But I'm curious about ginseng weed because it grows wild all over. It's on the property. It's all down the highway. It's toxic also.
It's quite toxic. It's used shamanically in pre-contact California. The California Indians had what was called the Tolach religion, and they used ginseng weed seeds to initiate people at puberty, boys mostly. It's I'm kind of Pollyannish about drugs. I mean, I'm after a certain thing, which these tryptamine hallucinogens do, and I tend to not pursue these other things too far. I didn't like Datura. It's very hard to have the degree of clarity that I think you should have on a drug. The tryptamine hallucinogens don't interfere with your clarity at all. You know who you are, where you are, what you're doing. I've seen people on Datura. I had an experience with someone on Datura where in the course of the conversation it came out that the guy thought we were in his apartment and I had actually encountered him in the marketplace. Well, that's a serious delusion. That's a serious problem. When I took Datura, all this was in Nepal years ago, I did have peculiar experiences. I mean, it is magical. It is delusory. Reality begins to come apart. These wraith-like, ghost-like creatures would come through my window, and I was waiting to get high, and then my attention would drift, and these things would come through my window, and they would let loose these sheets of newsprint that would flutter down over my life, and I would fall forward reading these things that were, and as I read, amazement would grow in me and say, this is it, this is the answer, this is it. And then I would pull out and say, is it working? Is anything happening? And that went on, so there were several passes of that, and then it caused me to throw my leg up around my neck, and I got into this kind of thing. And I very carefully unfolded myself and lay back down, and then it happened again. And I thought to myself, I'm really glad I'm alone, because I think this would freak anybody out. And but it was definitely strange. I mean, the guy down the hall from me, I had taken it, he had taken it, and he had the impression in the night that this woman that he was scheming on came to him and that they made love. And in the middle of the night, I got up to go to the John, and I had to cross through his room. And it was also my impression that she was in bed with him. Well, when we sorted it out the next morning, she'd been 30 miles away throughout the whole incident and had never been there. So it's interesting. There are a lot of altered states. Maybe that's a good point to make. There are all kinds of strange states of mind, and many plant-induced. From sorting through them, I've just become sort of fixated on these tryptamine things because they seem to me somehow the most promising and the most real. The hallucinations of ginseng weed are curiously related in my mind. It's some kind of association schema. They're like seances and table tapping and Victorian women in shredded lace dresses, and that's about as far from a DMT hallucination as you can get. I mean, DMT hallucinations are 3, if not 4-dimensional, brightly colored, high-tech, organo-insectoid, so forth and so on.
You talked about the momentum is so strong, and then having to change it. And I think of all the people that are opposed to drugs, and they think every drug is the same and so forth. It just seems like an impossible task to be able to educate where these drugs would be available, and then people could take them and they'd see the world in a healthier way. What do you have to say about a question like that?
Well, it's this struggle about human nature, defining human nature, Is it good to take certain drugs? Is it always bad to take drugs? Can you always tell a drug from a food, from a spice? What do these words really mean? All we can do is what we are doing, which is replicate the mean. Hold these workshops, try to build a core of consensus about what we're talking about. And this is itself quite elusive, you see, because what we're talking about is a mental event. Less focused than, let us say, orgasm. But even if you're talking about orgasm, here we use this word, but it must mean something different to everybody. Well, the problem is much worse with the psychedelic experience, because nobody wants to be left out. So anybody who's ever taken anything thinks they've had the psychedelic experience and feels fully qualified to hold an opinion on it, when in fact it's pretty elusive, the real thing. You have to take a heroic dose under the right conditions to really smash through. I mean, yes, there are all kinds of approaches to it. Insight into childhood trauma, recovery of lost memories, opening to your emotional side, insights into the dynamics of the life and people around, all of it. But that is not anywhere near the bullseye. That's just dancing around the rim of it. So we have to, as a community, try and build consensus about what happens at the real center. What's happening at the center of the mandala? What kind of a modality can we describe and create a shared map of that we can come back to the rest of the folks and talk about? And then the other thing is, I'm just banking on curiosity to do a lot of the footwork for the revolution. This is too good to miss. It's like placing sex off limits or something and then expecting people not to find out about it. Now that Marxism has collapsed, if we don't substitute something for consumer values, then we're just going to rape the earth in an effort to create crap for everybody. Well, the only counterpoise to consumer values, to materialism, is spiritualism. And I don't mean some bloodless, carol-singing kind of namby-pamby abstraction. I mean there has to be as much inner richness as there previously was outer richness. And this is why, to the alarm of some people, I've been fairly interested in virtual realities. Because I think, if everybody wants to live in Versailles, the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you make Versailles a disc for $3.95 that they can plug in and then go live in it. So we can't preach to the have-nots the virtue of voluntary simplicity when we're riding around in BMWs and collecting Monets. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So building a core consensus, this is still in answer to your question, what can we do? And then replicating the meme. And I introduce this concept in each of my workshops because I think it makes it easier for you to understand what's happening here. A meme is the smallest unit of an idea. It's like a gene is to proteins. Proteins are made by genes, and genes code for proteins. Okay, well, ideas are made out of memes. And you link a few memes together, and you have an idea. memes, like genes, can be replicated. You replicate them by either telling the meme to many people or telling a lot of people all at once. And then these people you've told, they become potential replicators of the meme. And there is a domain of culture that is like an environment of competing ideas. And the memes go off and live in this ideological environment. And some flourish, and some are consumed by others, and some are incorporated into others. And the idea is to keep the psychedelic meme alive, and to make it grow, and to allow its claim to be heard. It's not in danger of dying. It's a very persistent meme. It's been around for about 20,000 years, and it's been highly repressed in many cultures for the last couple of thousand years. Yet we're trying to rebirth it. So thinking about it that way, thinking of yourself as a replicator of this thing which wishes to move through society, gives a mechanical model for understanding what is really ideological war. You know, a war about the definition of human nature. That's what's at stake. What shall we become? What can we become? There's no question that we need a greater consciousness of who we are. And if psychedelic drugs are to be taken seriously at all as consciousness-expanding agents, then they have to be given their due place in the great dialogue that's taking place about the future, creating it, and then realizing it, the future of the species.
I wanted to say something further about the book of Genesis and the notion of getting to the center. There are two cherubims guarding the gate with the flaming swords, and that they represent a pair of opposites, fear and desire, and that part of the problem of getting a bite of that tree of immortal life is getting to the realm beyond the pair of opposites, beyond fear and desire. And the other related thing is that the question of why this world is not one of just homogeneous perfection, and instead a world of multiplicity of forms and conflicts. And it's from a drop of ignorance that spills into undifferentiated perfection, and from that one drop of ignorance proceeds the multiplicity of the world we experience.
This is a Gnostic idea, the drop of ink in the pure glass of water. Yeah, well, Gnosticism was the idea. I mean, it had many forms, but the basic idea was that light had been scattered through the universe, and that the task of salvation was to gather this light together and to somehow transmit it back to its source in some higher dimension, which it's a pretty good metaphor. One of the issues that comes up in these workshops inevitably, and I confess I don't have a real answer for this, is, are we a part of nature and the stewards of nature, or are we out of nature? Are we of another ontos and sculpted for a different destiny? It's very clear that the life of the planet and our success as a conscious species, these two things have to either be split away from each other, or one is going to be the undoing of the other. And this is a real problem. This problem haunts Western thinking. It's nothing new. Is nature God, or is nature the devil? I mean, that's the harshest statement of this problem.
One of the ways of detecting breast cancer is with thermography, where they look for a hot spot on the breast, and that's a suspicious area. And I think when I'm up in an airplane at night and I look down on Gaia. Think of this as an organism, a giant organism, and say, gee, there's a Cancer down there. It's hot. You can see it. It's glowing. And you go down there, and what you find is, if you look upon us as sort of the cells which have gone awry, and the way in which we've gone awry is the nature of our consciousness, in that it's focused in terms of time and space and causality. And then the thumb, the prehensile, the ability to do something about it, because I don't know for sure, but I imagine that the dolphins could have their consciousness with a sense of time, and they might have some of the same time, space, causality understanding of the physical world that we do, but they lack the ability to do anything about it.
To project force into the world.
So that given those two qualities, this quality of our minds to look upon the world through, in this way, time, space, and causality, and that thumb, we have become the Cancer on the organism of the Earth.
Well, see,
it's quite a negative thought.
It is negative, and I'm not sure that I buy into it, and I'm not sure that I don't buy into it either. This is the question. Is the evolution of historical society and science and all the ugly adumbrations of that, sexism, fascism, racism, is that part of the process? Or is it a breaking away? Is there some good in it? Was history for something, or would we have just been better off without it? And I don't know. Sometimes I think of Western civilization as the prodigal son. You know, we went forth, we left our father's house, which was the archaic style of existence. We left our father's house, and we wandered into matter and cut deals with demonic forces, and millennia have passed, and now the earth is polluted, and we are back at the longhouse, saying to these people, do you have any wisdom that can save us from our fate? Well, they do, to a degree. I mean, they have this deep insight into natural dynamics and curing, and maybe more. I mean, maybe there is magic in this world. But we know some things, too. I mean, we can summon the energy of the stars, if necessary, down to the deserts of this planet, or to the cities of our enemies, if necessary. And this is no small accomplishment on any scale. This is quite impressive. I mean, my God, that cytoplasm could create a strategy for triggering fusion. It's amazing. So I would like to think that this peregrination into matter went for something, that these are skills that we may need out in the universe when we really get our wings and take off. And that this deep involvement with matter, it was a kind of an addiction. And if we can pull out of it, a great deal has been learned. I mean, after all, if people had stayed in the rainforests, then we would have been ineluctably linked to the destiny of this planet as an animal species. And what if this is the only intelligence in the universe? Then I would think we have a certain obligation to preserve it past the life of the existence of the solar system. So if we're not willing to commit ourselves at any phase of our evolution to a technical phase that involves mastery over matter, then we have no more defense against the larger universe than raccoons and katydids if push comes to shove. I don't know. I mean, I stress that there's no easy resolution on this. It haunts all thinking about conservation. I mean, I thought throughout the 80s, why aren't the conservationist space colony enthusiasts? Why don't the Save the World people support the high-tech solutions that would move industry off the planet? Why are these various factions unable to make common cause behind a very large vision? And I don't know, but I think as pressure mounts for solutions, this will have to be done. I mean, I would like to live in a world where the entire Earth was a bioreserve. I would like to live in a situation where the idea that there would be heavy industry inside the bioreserve would be thought an abomination. All that stuff can be done on the moon or in the asteroid belts. It's as inappropriate as having a nuclear power plant in the middle of a rainforest to have heavy industry on the surface of the Earth. We need to think on very large time scales, and we need to figure out how to create political machinery to do that. We've been living a potlatch existence, just a frenzied, consumerist kind of unthinking abuse. And I think the best inoculation for that style of life is a stiff dose of psychedelics. You can't evade it. You know, it dissolves boundaries. It allows you to feel what you're doing. I mean, the level of denial in this society is incredible. My God, we don't feel it. We read the newspaper, but we don't feel what it's telling us. You know, because if we felt it, we would probably be an emotional wreck. But there's something to be said for opening up to some of that. There's a notion in therapy that if you want the client to actually make progress, you raise the alarm level. Guy comes to you for therapy, you say to him, you think you've got problems? You have no idea what problems you have. And then work from there. So it's very serious business. It's trying to steer a society back toward a faith that was lost. I mean, God is like a lost continent in the human mind, and it's the only continent where there is safe harbor in the present historical situation.
You're listening to the Psychedelic Salon, where people are changing their lives one thought at a time.
As I was listening to Terence with you just now,